So you had to have me for yourself. That was when I trusted you, when I could add up 2 and 2. When you promised we'd be together, you, me, forever. Now there's nothing left to lose. And though I understand it's hard sometimes to make up your mind in these trying times, yeah, I just can't accept you leaving me when I'm overseas with the heart so heavy. Think that I deserve the truth for not a guilty tone, 'cause you're not alone, yeah. You said you wanna come home, but I know you don't. So this time I won't hear it on the phone. If you got something to say to me, then say it to my face. What it's all about, why you're bailing out. Think you owe me an apology. Just say it to my face, you're sorry. You're so sorry. You're so sorry. You're so sorry. Say it to my face, you're sorry.
Join our membership program, sign up, find out what's going on, become a patron, and support our work. We're doing these amazing virtual live streams covering events, marches, protests, and actions that mainstream media just isn't covering.
A lot of these very common sense policy interventions aren't given the space they need.
You know, the truth is, before we have the political revolution, we need a media revolution.
We really see this opening in the media space with television transitioning to the internet in particular. Streaming platforms, Netflix, Hulu, etc., are the next frontier.
And we're not mainstream media. You're not getting a 10-second clip and a very watered down, whitewashed version of what's going on.
Having a media company to support these kind of movement efforts is extremely valuable.
People want to talk to us because they know that we're talking to the people.
We need a dedicated, empowered, honorable base of people who are willing to fight for what they believe in.
This needs to be all of us, not just like watching great content, not just sharing great content, but taking the correlated action and making sure that together these movements are more effective across the board.
We are amplifying activists' messages, activist movements, activist campaigns, activist call to action. There's no more important work to be done in this country right now, and ACT TV is doing it, and we need you to be a member. Go to ACT.tv and sign up to be a member today.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams, we're going to be discussing him with Pascal Robert of the Black Agenda Report and This Is Revolution podcast as soon as he's available. But what has he done? Dwayne, let me know when you get that clip. He's basically, I don't know who this guy thinks he is. Let me just start there. He is trying to present himself as a black man, a Democrat, which I don't care about the Democrat part, like, well, whatever, but he ran as a Democrat. But now he is so ultra police, so pro police, which I would argue he's always been pro police. So I don't know why New York would have elected this man, but he's the mayor. He's so pro police. He was talking about bringing stop and frisk back. I think he said he was joking about that. But I want you to listen to this clip as we get ready for our next guest. And he's discussing how he wants to train New Yorkers to respect the police and keep their distance when filming police officers. And he said, if your iPhone is bad, get you a new iPhone because you don't have to get that close to his police officers when they're beating up citizens and you're trying to film it. That's the latest from Eric Adams. He just said it yesterday. Let's hear it from his own mouth.
With policing and other crimes with others, if people are documenting it, what's your message to the community when they want to document what's going on with trying to stay safe, getting guns off the streets?
Without a doubt, and that is one thing that we're going to do. We're going to teach the public how to properly document. If an officer is on the ground wrestling with someone that has a gun, they should not have to worry about someone standing over them with a camera while they're wrestling with someone. If an officer is trying to prevent a dispute from taking place and de-escalate that dispute, they shouldn't have someone standing over their shoulders with a camera in their face, yelling and screaming out there at them without even realizing what the encounter is all about. There's a proper way to police and there's a proper way to document. If your iPhone can't catch that picture with you being at a safe distance, then you need to upgrade your iPhone. Stop being on top of my police officers while they're carrying out their jobs. That is not acceptable and it won't be tolerated. That is a very dangerous environment you are creating when you're on top of that officer who has an understanding of what he's doing at the time, yelling police brutality, yelling at the officer, calling them names. Now he has to worry about who's behind him. Is he part of the process that he's trying to de-escalate? That has gotten out of control. You can safely document an incident, but we can use that footage to analyze what happened. But that's not what's happening right now in our city. We're finding people who are standing on top of the officer while he's involved in a dangerous encounter. Not acceptable. It's not going to continue to happen.
He said, yeah, man. He said a lot there. Joining us now to discuss is Pascal Robert. He is of the Black Agenda Report, and This Is Revolution podcast. First and foremost, good morning to you, brother. How are you?
Good morning to you, Brother Ben. Good to be on your show. Good morning to you as well, to your co-host. Glad to have me here.
Good morning. Absolutely. Good morning.
Brother, we've been talking, and you describe Eric Adams as the neoliberal corporate Democrat trial balloon who is sent to crush and smash the progressive wing of the party, the Sanders wing of the party. Now, when I read that, I said yes and amen and come on the show and talk about it. Tell us why Eric Adams is this new wave of attack against actual progress, not just for people in general, but for black people specifically.
Well, to do this, I think we have to put things in a certain context of the evolution of black politics and the black political class, particularly in the last 20 years. All right. We basically went from a paradigm of the black political class, and the black political class, for your audience who don't know, are the elected officials and also the social superstructure that exists in the black community around civil rights organizations, the black church, membership organizations, fraternities, sororities, and so on and so forth, that buttress the political establishment as well as the ideological and political choices that exist in the black community in terms of what kind of options we have. And they basically act as what you would call a buffer class. class that buttresses support traditionally for the Democratic Party and promotes policies usually to their benefit in exchange for patronage that I pejoratively call fatback and biscuits to their betterment and usually to the detriment of poor and working class Black people. But there has been an evolution in the nature of the Black political class in the 50 plus years post-civil rights, in that the first generation of the Black political class that came out of the Gary, Indiana Convention in the 1970s were traditionally former civil rights affiliated type politicos who, because of working through government programs through the Great Society, developed an affinity and a connection to political administrations in the Democratic Party, and then rose to the level of becoming the first iteration of the Black political class. But because they had to maintain certain credentials with the grassroots civil rights community in the kind of post-Black Power era, they still had to at least have the patina or illusion of a redistributive agenda to Black folk. Right, that's how you get your Maynard Jacksons, your Andrew Youngs, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm trying to be quick here because I know what time is of the essence. So I'm trying to go through this lesson. We move into the 80s and 90s in the way in which neoliberalism, which is basically a fancy way for shifting capitalism to hyper-privatization, deregulation of finance capital, and the removing of government-funded policy to the benefit of the population to a more pro-capitalist, pro-private sector agenda to marketize everything. In that era, what we have to understand is that Black politics reflects that change in the nature of capitalism in America. And what we find is our Black political officials, particularly what we call the urban regimes, because, some of your audience may not be old enough, but I'm old enough to remember where in a time where every major city in America had a Black mayor. New York City had Dinkins, you had Howard Washington, you had L.A., had, I forgot the name of I always forget the name of the brother who was mayor of L.A. back in the day. Atlanta, so on and so forth. So there was a proliferation of Black mayors in these cities, but because these cities were basically transforming into a period of neoliberalism where they did not have the same kind of government largesse as they did in the 50s, these guys unfortunately had to oversee much austerity type politics that disadvantage working class and poor Black people, and also govern over regimes of mass incarceration, because Black people in a period of economic precarity due to neoliberalism, the poor are going to be sacrificed to mass incarceration, Black and white, but disproportionately Black. So that is the first shift of the Black political class away from what we saw in the 70s, where they could at least pretend to have a redistributive agenda, right? And then in the 90s, with the rise of democratic neoliberalism, the Black political class pretty much embraces neoliberalism because they're reacting to the fear of the Newt Gingrich Republicans.
That's right.
Bill Clinton is the first Democrat who wins after 3 presidential elections where you have Republicans having won. Reagan 80, Reagan 84, Bush the first 88. And those regimes were so right-wing, and you know this story as well as I do, Ben. The Democratic Party embraces the Democratic Leadership Conference, pivots to the right, supports corporate agenda, tough on crime, tough on Black people politics, and takes us into the 25, 30-year spectrum of Democrat-led neoliberal politics that's even worse for Black people, quite frankly, right? Okay, so the Black political class shifts in that way as well. What we see in the millennium is the rise of the first generation of truly neoliberal Black politicians. One of the things my mentor, Bruce Dixon and Glenn Ford, used to talk about is that there was a trial balloon of about 5 candidates to become the first Black president, and they all have very similar politics and aesthetics. Cory Booker, Barack Obama, Arthur Davis, Adrian Fenty, and Harold Ford Jr. All elite Ivy League educated or proximate, all very pro-corporate charter schools, all very highly financed by corporate America, all very pro-growth, pro-capitalist, pro-big business type politics, and all using respectability politics, pull up your pants type rhetoric. Very common. Michael Nutter was a Philadelphia manifestation of that politics. So that's like the third iteration of the black political class. And we see what that got us, which is the rise of Obama, which some of my mentors and teachers like Bruce Dixon used to say was the death knell of black politics. So what happens is that we shift from the neoliberal, really pro-capitalist, pro-corporate black politician, which is still in the kind of aura capturing the imagination of black folk. You have a pivot to the rise of Bernie Sanders and the quote unquote Sanders Democratic Socialist, AOC, so on and so forth. Now, though these people don't really capture the imagination of black voters, they present an ideological challenge to all of the earlier manifestations of the black political class, because black people are now realizing these Negroes have not done anything for us. And now you have people like AOC and otherwise are talking about, hey, what about, a more expansive state government program to give you a federal jobs guarantee, a free college, free state college, healthcare, so on and so forth. So even though black people may not be entering into supporting that politics, the challenge of these people seeming more progressive than the black political class creates a conflict. This is a very important point that you must convey to your audience. The black political class, particularly in the Congressional Black Caucus, much of their political legitimacy is premised on leveraging the bona fides of the civil rights movement and the illusion of being racially progressive to give them a voice to actually replicate very damaging pro-corporate black. Corporate politics.
You mean people like Jim Clyburn? Anyway,
exactly.
Go ahead. We were talking about Eric Adams, though. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes. So I'm going to get to the point. What does Eric Adams represent? Eric Adams, I would argue, represents the fourth iteration of the black political class, in that he is reacting to the failures of the neoliberal Obama type black political class, the Cory Bookers, the Obamas, Fenty's, Harold Ford Jr.'s, etc. And he's also reacting to the rise of the AOC Sanders faction. And he's basically trying to tap dance between the two while still maintaining a fealty or an allegiance to the same corporate pro-Wall Street, pro-real estate development fact. Don't forget, Eric Adams was one of the most extensively backed real estate development backed candidates in that mayoral election that he won last year. And he's already made statements to Wall Street saying that we need you guys in New York. And there's an article by, I think his name is Chuck Gasparino. He's like one of these Wall Street guys. He's always on Fox News. It's in the New York Post. I was just reading it this morning preparing for the show, where literally, this is like a New York City white ethnic Wall Street guy who is praising former cop black mayor Eric Adams for his willingness to dump all that progressive, left socialist rhetoric crap and support big business and finance capital. And, Gasparino is really one of these blowhard right-wing capitalist types who's like, yeah, I'm glad to see Adams is not down with the comrades. And there's a quote that he has of Eric Adams, where Adams literally says, we need more of you Wall Street guys and less of these AOC types.
Wow. Pascal, I want to ask you really briefly with the time we have, man, where does it go? Because not only is he everything that you listed there, right? And I mean, you gave us a lot, but I followed that thread. I followed what you were saying. Eric Adams is the evolution of, and we can say devolution of the black political class, but he is himself a reaction to the last political class, the black movement that came before.
A reaction to two factors. The neoliberal black political class, the Obama, Fenty types, and the rise of the AOC progressive Sanders faction. And he's trying to thread the needle between the two.
And he's doing a balancing act also with, it seems to work, right? I guess what I'm trying to throw at you is this twisted combination seems to have been enough, one, for him to get elected. Two, he's using this honeymoon period where he can leverage as much damage as he can, right? He's going as full police, pro-police as he's a former police officer himself, so that makes sense. But he is merging the worst of all of the categories. He's merging the police state with the exploitative nature of capitalism. He's merging it with the facade of blackness, the form of blackness denying the power thereof. He's like the trifecta of black misleadership. Go ahead.
Let me tell you how absolutely spot on you are. And I applaud your astute assessment, which doesn't surprise me because you have very many astute assessments, Ben. Is that,
man, bless you, brother. I appreciate that.
When Eric Adams was running, he was literally being touted by the black chattering class. And you know me long enough to know when I say black chattering class, I mean black media, black journalists, so on and so forth. The New York City black chattering class, people like Errol Lewis and others who are very good journalists. Errol Lewis is a very good New York City journalist, long time. I have respect for him. I think his politics are more conservative than mine, but he's a good, solid black journalist. These people were touting Eric Adams as the new black power in New York City. In other words, he is the new manifestation of black power in New York. There are articles to that effect, that he is the new. So what you're finding, right, is that there's a generation of black people who are about my age or a little older, who did not come out of the movement era, who are now, we're kind of like the adults in the room of the black communities we have throughout the country, right? And most of us are too young to have come out of the movement era or to have been adults. Even Eric Adams is too young to come out of it. So our only contextual memory of black politics is pretty much the black political class post-civil rights. So as a result, many of us have a fetish obsession with people like Maynard Jackson, people like other black political class officials who did expand the black middle class in their constituencies, but there's little discussion about how their policies affected working class and poor black people.
Pascal, we have so much to discuss. I know it's been a while since I had you on. I got to get you back soon. You come with a volume of knowledge and context and nuance that is necessary. But I'm going to have to hold the conversation here. Tell everyone how they can get up with you and support your work.
Absolutely. You guys can check us out at This Is Revolution Podcast at all your relevant podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, so on and so forth. This Is Revolution Podcast at YouTube. You can check me out at PROBERT at PRobert06. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on social media. You can Google my name at Black Agenda Report. You'll see my work. I also write for Newsweek as well. You can check my name out, and you'll see my articles in Newsweek. I have articles in the Huffington Post. As Ben can tell you, I've been writing about black politics for over a decade now. So, for those who are not familiar with my work, you can check it out.
You've been in this longer than I have, brother. I appreciate everything that you do. We'll talk with you soon.
All right, brother. Peace.
I'm excited to be joined this morning by George M. Johson. I'm excited because there's a conversation that has to be had about the effects of everything that we see happening around us as it pertains to critical race theory, the fight against banning certain books, and even in the state of Florida, the fight against the LGBTQI community that's being waged by people like the governor there, Ron DeSantis. George Johson is the award-winning Black non-binary writer, author, and activist based in the New York City area. They have written on race, gender, sex, and culture for Essence, The Advocate, BuzzFeed News, Teen Vogue, and more than 40 other national publications. They are the author of All Boys Aren't Blue, which has been banned now in nearly 20 states. I want to repeat that. They have banned this book, All Boys Aren't Blue, in 20 states. George, thank you so much for joining us. How are you this morning?
Thank you for having me. I'm awake. I'm in LA, so it's just turned 6:30. But I'm excited to be here.
We appreciate you getting up that early. I know the West Coast is a monster when we try to do these live shows on the East Coast, so we really do appreciate it. Tell us, if you don't mind, about the book All Boys Aren't Blue and what you're fighting against now, which is a full-on court press to ban your book everywhere.
Yeah, my book, All Boys Aren't Blue, is pretty simple. It's just my life story from birth until the age of 21, growing up as a Black kid in a small city called Plainfield, New Jersey, who always knew that I was different, even if I didn't have the language to understand what different was. And so the book really just showcases my journey through childhood, through being a young adult and going to college. But it tells the true story of what that existence is like at the intersection of Blackness and queerness. And my story also intersects and weaves in a lot of moments from my family, because my family was very queer affirming, which is something that we don't often hear about or talk about within the Black family dynamic. And so it's really a love letter to my grandmother in many ways, but it's a story about family and just one person's journey, myself, on, through the age of discovery.
What about almost 20 states? That is a huge statement to the threat that those people, that group, that cabal see your work. I want to take this in two steps. What about your work makes them so afraid? And then two, how could we best describe that group that is now almost at 20 states banning your book?
Yeah. My book, at the root of my book, it tells the truth. My book simply tells the truth. The sections that they are pinpointing are two in particular. One where I discuss a sexual abuse that I experienced when I was around the age of 12. And a second section where I talk about losing my virginity, and I was a little bit older. I was around the age of 21. And so in both of those sections, though, I do depict what is going on. I talk about what the experience was like. I talk about it, very boldly and vividly what actually happened in those two instances. But they're trying to say that what I'm selling is pornography, when realistically, what I'm selling in the one chapter is teaching youth about consent. It's teaching the youth about grooming. It's teaching the youth about how to recognize sexual trauma and repress trauma. And in the other section, it's literally a critique on how poor our sex education system is in the United States, so much so that people who are queer don't even know that they're at risk, at much higher risk for HIV, and how we have to really update the sexual education systems in this country because our kids really don't know about consent. And the only places that we can learn about sex from oftentimes becomes pornography, which is why so many have a warped view of what sex actually is versus the main depiction of what most of us can see.
There's a lot there. And I can say there's a lot there because anyone who has dealt with trauma, either personally or cared for someone who's dealt with trauma, understands that you don't heal until you address it. You can't move past trauma until you actually can verbalize it and discuss it. And so it's almost as if their argument makes no sense if they're saying you discussing trauma is going to cause trauma. It doesn't make sense. I can see it from a homophobic kind of generalized fear of bigoted fear that they're so used to in this country. I don't get the logical argument from their perspective, which leads me to the second question. Who are these people specifically? Because I sometimes generalize and say like white supremacists or conservatives, but that group might be a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's not a large group. It's mainly a group called the Moms for Liberty and No Left Turn in Education, I believe, is the second group. Not huge groups. It's not 1 million people after us. Even when you look at the numbers, it's always like 2 parents complained about this book to get it pulled. 3 parents complained about this book to get it pulled. 1 parent complained about this book to get it pulled. So it's not like a huge group. They're just a group that is very well mobilized. And so they're in all 50 states. They have about 135 chapters. in terms of the Moms for Liberty. And so they just have basically made a coordinated attack against a list. They just have a list of books and they all just go to their school boards and complain about the list. None of them have read the book. And realistically, they are living under a conservative ideology that is built in like purity of like white children and innocence of white children. And because of that, they're rooted in that ideology. They feel that anything that either downplays the history of this country, talks about how the forefathers were slave owners and rapists, because my book does that too, or talks about experiences that aren't of their pure children who are going to be jaded by my Black queer experience, then those books need to be pulled.
A small, concentrated group that has a list. And, you know, I mean, I've been following this story for a minute. You can't help but follow how many people are being attacked in this space. But it's not happenstance that other books on that list directly address what you already listed: white supremacy, systemic racism, critical race theory in the generalized sense, not in the theoretical sense per se. But tell me, why is it so easy to go just from one ism to the next? All of the phobias from one to the next. It's like there's a very small step to go from being a racist bigoted to being a misogynist bigoted or a homophobic bigot. Tell us, if we don't catch it on one, how is it so easy to miss it on all the others?
Yeah, I think people don't realize how systems of oppression are all interconnected. And so oftentimes when you hear people talk about a system of oppression, they talk about it from a very siloed standpoint. And so people will talk about healthcare, but don't talk about how K through 12 feeds into socioeconomic status, feeds into healthcare, feeds into police brutality, right? And so it's almost, which is why when people first started talking about the school to prison pipeline, it kind of blew people's minds because they didn't realize that these two systems, i.e. the criminal justice system and the K through 12 education system, were so interconnected into what plays out in specifically Black and brown children's lives, as it was pushing the kids into that system from as early as the age of 6 or 7. And so part of the issue is people don't look at racism or gendered violence or, as I said, healthcare as interconnected, interwoven systems, when realistically it is, like you said, it's easy to jump from one to the other because they're actually not like 3 separate circles. They're more like that Venn diagram where you do one circle here, one circle here, one circle here, and then you notice like, oh, wow, they all interconnect at a certain point. And I think that's really the truth of the matter. And it is just like you said, it's easy to jump from one to one to one because they are all birthed out of each other.
That's right. That's right. This is why I, if you don't mind, just let me go on a little tangent here. That's one of the reasons I throw people off with this show a little bit, because there's a generalized expectation because of my background that I would hold some of the same bigoted views and that I actually had once held. I mean, I wrote a book about, you know, my past, growing from my religious context, and I can't even blame it all on religion. A lot of my growth had to come from just community and culture, movies that I watched, teaching me to have a bigoted view or use bigoted language as it pertains specifically to the LGBTQIA community. And so I have found in this space of trying to create something that everybody Black can be comfortable in, I found some of the most pushback that I get is right here. At this specific intersection, when we try to open the doors of the church to everybody, it gets a little tricky. This is a facetious question, but have you ever run into that?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah, all the time. And like you said, like even with the church, it's like, come as you are. And then in very small print, it's like, accept. If you are this, and this. Yeah. I mean, I will say, even with the book ban, I haven't run into as much pushback from pockets of Black communities as I anticipated, but a lot of the silence also still speaks volumes. And so it's it's kind of like where, you know, these conservatives are very vocal and very loud. I'm not seeing like the historic Black organizations push back or say too much about the topic. And I think silence has a voice. And so I think right now what we're witnessing is how those organizations, specifically, their silence is speaking volumes. Because just with my background of being a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, just with my background of being a 2-time HBCU alumnus, there's no reason that places like the NAACP haven't picked this up, and places like the Black churches aren't picking up the book bans. And right, I grew up with a Black grandmother who went to Mount Zion AME in Plainfield, New Jersey, and I went there, you know, my whole life. And so I think it's the silence that speaks for a lot of those places and communities right now.
Yeah, it's a process, and we'll talk more, because I would love to get you back to talk even more about your second book that is rooted in our Blackness and is rooted in this journey. We Are Not Broken. If you don't mind telling us a little bit about that second book, and then tell us how our supporters can get both of them, because LeVar Burton said the best way to push back against banning books is to buy those books and read them.
Yeah. My second book, We Are Not Broken, is really a love letter to my grandmother, Nanny, who passed away December of 2019. It is the story of myself and my younger brother, as well as my 2 cousins. And for me, it's like this really coming of age story where you get to see how Black boys deserve to have childhoods and excitement and adventures and imaginations. And we had that, and we all had that with my grandmother. And so each of the grandchildren got to write a letter to her within the book. And it really is just a story about, you know, Black boy joy at its core, and the Black grandmother experience, as she was just unwilling to allow us to not have a Black boy experience because of how hardened society tries to make us.
I'm definitely picking up that book, because I'm dealing with that right now, ensuring that my kids, particularly my boys, have the same access to joy, everything that you listed: joy, imagination, just fun. Like, can our kids let their hair down sometime? I mean, not me, but my kids, can they let their heads down and not have to be so hardened because of the nature of our society? George M. Johnson, thank you so much for joining us today. We have to get you back as soon as we can.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Good morning, y'all. Good morning. Good morning.
Climbing every mountain, keep both eyes on the top, and nothing's gonna tell me to stop. Oh, push me through the fire, all I'm gonna feel is the heat burning underneath of my feet. Ooh, she call me crazy, tell me lies, it won't stop me, watch me rise, no more anchors holding me down.
Good morning, Mama and Daddy. Good morning, Kate Gibbons. Ism, good morning. Roller Dragon, what's going on? Jason Marks, Snack Panther, Boondocks Dragon, excuse me, Dragon Dang, what's going on? Jesse, Melody, good morning. Shay Dragon, Adrian, Nixon, good morning. Impact, good morning to you, Amber Layla, Mother Lateen, man, Creative Impact. Let me know when I need to come down there. You guys have not checked your messages on your phone, being in David. Don't forget, y'all, it's going down tonight. Patron party tonight. You want to miss the patron party?
Every time I dream, I catch it. I know how to make it happen.
Lily, good morning to you, Lily. Purpose of Manifest, good morning. Six Dragon Lady, good morning.
Sticks and stones may break my bone, but your words can't hurt me.
I think we're going for 9 p.m. 9 p.m. I think that's 9 p.m. tonight, right, baby?
And it still can't hurt me. No, it just can't hurt me. No. No, you just can't hurt me. No, you just can't hurt me, no, no, no. I know it's hard to be polite, and it's easy being petty. My mama used to tell me, gotta use you when you ready. Man, it's crazy how my brother said it could have been my set. It's either prison or a grave, that's what everybody tell me. Man, life ain't a beach, it's a female dog. I'm staying 10 toes down, though I still might fight.
Elizabeth Long, good morning.
Cause loving people who persecute you, it's still a tough life. On my path and a lamp under my feet. I know my faith strong, but my flesh still kinda weak. When that victory be looking like the verge of defeat, and I feel like disrespect, help me turn my other cheek and say sticks and stones may break my bone, but your words can't hurt me. No, you just can't hurt me. No, I ain't been right more than I've been wrong, and it still can't hurt me. No, it just can't hurt me. No.
Tiger, good morning to you, Tiger. Iris, good morning.
You can't hurt me. No, no, no. No, you just can't hurt me. No, you just can't hurt me. No. See, it's hard to be polite. It's easy being petty. Mama used to tell me, gotta use you when you're ready. Cause I ain't working on my own timing. Ain't got no diamonds on me, but I stay shining. Yeah, yeah. They say the world would be a better place if we take out the hate. Stop all the hate right now. Yeah. Let's keep it real. It'd be better if we just subtract the fake. Yeah. So be a light up on my
Rachel Bannon, good morning to you. EH, good morning.
Still kind of weak when that victory be looking like the verge of defeat, and I feel like disrespect. Help me turn my other cheek and say sticks and
James Conn, you stupid.
may break my bone, but your words can't hurt me. No, you just can't hurt me. No, I ain't been right more than I've been wrong, and it still can't hurt me. No, it just can't hurt me. No. No, you just can't hurt me. No, you just can't hurt
Brother
me.
Bryce, good morning.
No.
EH will drop it later on today, if I'm not mistaken. It'll be in the Patreon, maybe the Discord. Yeah. Miss Sophia, good morning to you. Lunch break, hot take, good morning.
10 toes deep, flower child from the turf. I never switch.
All right, y'all. Sorry to cut this off. But don't worry, we'll bring it back later on. Good morning, y'all.
Thank you, Spike, for making the...
Yeah, glad to be here. How you doing? All right. Well, I'm from the People's Republic of Brooklyn, New York. Is Brooklyn in the house? You say that anywhere in the world, you're going to get a response. And I've been very blessed to do what I love. Most people on this God's earth go to their grave having slaved the job they hated. And when you could make a living doing what you love, you're blessed. And so, I'm doing what I love, and that's make films.
Amazing. Give it up for doing what you love. So Spike, tell us a little bit about how your career as a filmmaker got started and how 40 Acres and Mule was born.
Well, my dear late mother was a cinephile, and my father hated Hollywood movies. So I was my mother's movie date. I'm the eldest of 5. And so she would take me to movies, and I enjoyed it. I had no idea that one day I'd be a filmmaker. And it wasn't until the summer between my sophomore and junior years at Morehouse College where I declared a major, which is mass communications. And one of my best friends, it's crazy. This one day changed my life. The summer of 1977, New York City was broke. So I came home from Atlanta, from Morehouse, where the school is, and there were no summer jobs. And on this day, I went to see my friend Leanna Johson, and her father had just given her a super great camera. And I said, "What is that?" She said, "It's a great camera." I said, "What is that?" "It's the film for the camera." And she said, "You can have it." And I spent the rest of that summer filming stuff, and it changed my life. And I think often, what would have happened if I had not gone to see her that day? That one day changed everything for me. And when I put that super camera in my hand and just spent the whole summer shooting stuff, I knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And after graduating Morehouse, I came back home to go to NYU grad film school, and that was it.
All right, you've now spent a lot of time at NYU Film School. You're a self-described teacher and a tenured professor there.
Well, not self-described. I mean,
you are the teacher.
I'm a tenured professor. That's official. So I come from a long line of educators. So I've been teaching NYU Graduate Film School for the last 20 years. Many of the recent NYU is the best film school. We kick USC and AFI in the ass. And a lot of my students are going to be nominated, win Oscars. But for me, I'm an educator. And I go back every year, I teach a semester, and I love teaching. I've found that if you're a teacher, professor, and you're not learning from your students, then you're not teaching. That has to be education is back and forth. You have to learn, and you can learn from your students, and they learn from you. So it's an exchange. So it's very gratifying for me to teach, and I tell those students I was sitting in the same seat you were sitting in, and the hand of God's not gonna come out of the sky and anoint you the next motherfucker. Don't work like that. You gotta bust your ass. So it's like anything. You gotta have that work ethic. You gotta put the work in. It's not just gonna happen overnight. And sometimes hard work will beat talent. We see that in sports all the time, where the most talented team might not win because they're not working. The team is not as talented, but their team, they're gonna be victorious.
So you got to put in the work, you got to learn. And Spike, one thing I admire about how you've approached Web3 is you've been studying this for a while, Well,
I wouldn't say a while. I come from the end, I'm a dinosaur. I was born March 20th, 1957, so I'm 65 years old. So it is my young adult son and daughter that hit me to what has happened. They keep me, they let me know. So when they started talking about NFTs, I was like, damn, this is happening? And I started doing my research, and then this is a key moment. What do I have that I own? When you're a filmmaker, majority of filmmakers working today don't own their films. So you can't come on NFT, you have ownership, but my first film, She's the Habit, I raised the money myself. Film came on in 1986 for the older people in the audience, you might have seen it.
Yeah.
And we raised $175,000 for my first film. It went on to make $8.5 million. And recently the rights reverted back to me, so I had the IP. And one of the characters is Mars Black, who teamed with Michael Jordan to do those commercials back in the day that put Nike into the stratosphere. And Mars Black is the original B-head, the original sneakerhead, the B-boy, and most recently Nike launched their 50th anniversary launch, and they brought back Mars Blackman. So the character that's really set the groundwork for an NFT we're going to release of Mars Black.
All right, so you put in the work, you're looking into all of this stuff with NFTs. You're about to launch your first NFT collection with just under 4,000 pieces. Can you tell us a little bit about the NFT collection?
Well, I went back to original 35mm print of the film, and I curated specific frames of the film that are with Mars Black. I mean, that's a very great artist who added to the frames. So I think that God willing, is gonna hit.
I think anything you touch will hit. And so the project's called the Visible Project. And can you tell this group a little bit about your ambitions with it and how this is bringing together your work as an educator, as a creator, as a filmmaker?
Well, I'm not just into it to get some bags. It has to be an educational part of it. So, as a teacher at NYU, it's a 3-year program, and my students leave school owing $250,000 in student loans. Everybody can't afford to go to film school. So we're going to provide a vehicle through this NFT to nurture young filmmakers where we're going to have them submit their short films. And my grandmother always told me you got to crawl before you walk. So when you come out the gate trying to do a feature film and you have not acquired the necessary skills, that's going to be hard. Short film is 5, 10, 15 minutes. You can get away with stuff. But if you have to tell a story over a feature length time, you're going to be exposed. So short films, I think, is the way to go. And also, when I went to film school, there was none of this digital stuff happened. We went to film school not to get a degree. We went to film school to get access to the equipment. But now, if everybody has a phone, everybody has a laptop, you can make films. And people have made feature films, that were shot on their phones. So technology's brought a democracy to filmmaking. Up to that point, you had to have a lot of money to be in film.
So you're democratizing access to education through this?
Well, I'm using the technology to bring democracy to life. Because you should not, just because education, when it's time for money, is not a good thing. And everybody can afford, not just film school, just go to undergrad degree. So something that has to be done about how we could democratize education. Everybody can get education here in the United States of America without having a whole bunch of money.
All right. So, Spike, let's shift gears a little bit here. You're a prolific collector, whether it's comic books, sneakers, now NFTs.
Well, it started when I was a young kid. I started to collect. I had Marvel comic books. We weren't buying DC. We're not doing that. Superman is whack. We were Marvel and then baseball cards and a whole bunch of stuff. So I've been collecting, and most recently, part of my collection was at the museum that was just started by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. And you see I'm wearing my Prince gear. I got a story. Prince was one of my good friends, and I asked him for a guitar, and he looked at me like I was crazy. And a year later, this guitar case shows up at my house. has all the tags from all the travel that been done. And I had asked Prince for guitar. But open it up. It was guitar. And I mean, asked him a year ago. And it showed up. The next time I asked him, I said, can you sign it? And he said, Spike, you want me to take that guitar back? I said, no. So that's one of the many things in my collection, and it's cherished. And it's not, and you know, memorabilia, the most, especially sports, is game worn. Well, this guitar is concert played. And, I miss him. I miss him very much.
Absolutely. Very apt Prince reference since we're in Minneapolis. But Spike, what else is in your collection? Any other gems?
Well, for the basketball fans here, and since I'm the only Knicks fan here,
let's go Knicks! Let's go Lakers!
May 8th, 1970, Game 7. The New York Knicks versus the Los Angeles Lakers, the Willis Reed game. I had the net from that game. The Knicks won. They won that was their first world championship. I got Red Holzman, the coach, his ring. A lot of stuff worn by Jackie Robinson, a lot of sports stuff. Kareem Abdul's game-worn jersey with goggles. And you know I got Michael Jordan game-worn Jordans. Game-worn. So it's extensive.
Amazing. And you've also started to collect some NFTs from one-on-one artists, underrepresented communities. How are you thinking about your NFT collection, Spike, and starting to build that?
Well, I'm new in this game, and I'm not looking to say which NFT is going to blow up and, double, triple, and, the amount I pay. I'm just looking for art that I like. And again, I like to say about the democracy that technology has brought. I discovered a ton of young artists on Instagram, and I bought art from them. I would never know who these artists were, and I've always felt that there's abundance of talent, but if you don't have a platform to display your art to the world, you're stuck. But again, with this technology, I'm discovering people. I don't use the word discover, but I'm learning other art, and I love spending money, contributing to, like, people see what I buy also, but just encourage it, because I'm not just buying the art. I have dialogue with them, and a lot of times they think that I'm a fake. And they don't know it's me that's buying their art.
The real Spike Lee.
The real OG.
I think that's amazing, because so many celebrities and famous people who are getting into this space aren't necessarily taking that approach of thoughtful learning, collecting from individuals. So it's incredible. Spike, you also, though, have an epic sneaker collection. Can you tell us a little bit about your sneakers, a little bit about your hat?
Well, the character I played in Mars Black, the character I played Sham is the original sneakerhead. And growing up in Brooklyn, New York at my time, if your sneakers were correct, you couldn't come outside.
Facts. Hey.
You couldn't come outside. You came out, you had to. I remember my first pair of Converse, and they cost $5. And that was a ton of money back in the day. This is back in the day. Low top, high top, black or white. That's it. You came up here flyers, that would make it, or Skippy. And sneaker culture has evolved. And so I've always been a sneakerhead, and again, it was a blessing that my character I played, Mars Blackman, got paired with the greatest, with the GOAT, Michael Jordan. And those are some iconic commercials we did together.
Are those hand-painted, though?
Yeah, these, I don't know if you can put the camera on it.
Yeah, put the camera on these ones.
These are hand-painted Jordans with dedicated to Prince's album and the film Sign of the Time.
You got any sneakerheads in the crowd?
Sound kind of weak.
I said, do we have any sneakerheads in this crowd? Who like Spike's kick today? Very well.
In fact, I'm gonna. Here's how crazy the sneaker culture was and still is in Brooklyn. I mean, listen to me. This is what we used to say. If your sneakers slip and slide, get the ones from the star on the side. Ask your mom to empty the purse to get the ones that said Converse. I mean, I used to remember that. We were saying that I was 6, 7 years old. I'm 65, and I still remember. That's how ingrained, you know. As I said before, if your sneakers weren't right, you know, you would have come outside because people behind you, like, what's up with your sneakers?
And do you think NFTs might be the next version of cool sneakers?
Sneakers are cheap. Unless you get these
special hand-painted ones.
Huh?
Unless you get the ones like that.
Well, I had to pay the artist to do it, but you know, it's part of the culture.
And Spike, you've been a cultural icon for such a long time. Like, where do you think NFTs fit into this world of culture?
It fits because the culture is based upon art and arts. So I don't think that it fits right in. It fits right in. It's part of it.
Constant evolution. Awesome. I want to make sure we get a little bit more time to talk about the Visible Project and your vision for where this will go, both from sort of independent filmmakers, empowering these folks, and also through sort of access to the art. Can you tell us a little alpha about the project and when people might be able to get their hands on these? I think just under 4,000 of them.
Well, again, as I said before, these are curated by me taking out, you know, in the film there's 24 frames per second. So I had to go through the whole film and curate the best images of Mars throughout the whole film. And again, there's an educational component to this because we want to use this as the NFT as a vehicle to help and educate young filmmakers. And again, there's a lot of talent out there, and I want to be a vehicle to help people get out what they want to put out there and their art. And the thing about being a filmmaker, you're a storyteller. So we want people to tell their own distinct stories.
And I believe y'all will be putting on the Visible Festival. Are you getting any inspiration from day one of VeeCon?
Well, I'm going to be here all day, so I'm not going to predict what's going to happen. I'm just glad to be here and shout out to Gary Vee for inviting me.
Shout out to Gary for inviting us all. Spike, we've got a couple minutes left here. Any parting words of advice to the aspiring creators in this audience? We've got a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of creators who are looking to get their start.
Well, I'm going to say something again. My 100-year-old grandmother told me, put me through Morehouse at NYU Film School, is that you have to crawl before you walk, and that you have to put in the work. And as an artist, you have to develop your craft, and that comes from experience. You just can't show up on the spot and you're the motherfucker. It don't work like that. It's not work like that. And when I was in film school, I read an article about Akira Kurosawa, Japanese filmmaker, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. And the interviewer asked Kurosawa, he was 85 at the time, asked him, you were considered one of the great masters of cinema, all time. At your age, you must know everything about cinema. And Kurosawa said, even though I am the age I am, there's still a universe of cinema I have to learn. And a light bulb went off in my mind. Here's one of my favorite filmmakers, 85, and he says that there's still a universe that he has to learn. And so, it made me understand that you stop learning when you're breathing. And that never get to the spot where you think you're the motherfucker, excuse my language, that knows it all. You don't know it all. and be on a constant search for knowledge to learn, because that will impact your craft and make you the best version of artist you can be.
Always be learning. Spike Lee is just dropping absolute gems right now.
Thank you.
Okay, so Spike, last question, and then we're out of here. Tell us about your hat too, and any special words on your friend Prince.
Well, after this, I'm going over to Paisley Park. I have not been there since our brother left us in this physical state. And the first time I met him, he called me up and said, Spike, I'm shooting Graffiti Bridge. I want you to come to the set. And at first I didn't believe it was him. And so I bet I'm there. And that's where friendship began. Because, you know, a lot of times you think that to be a friend with somebody, you have to be in their face all the time. You just be a great friend with somebody and you only talk once a year. And so when you come to New York, you know, we would get together, but it wasn't like we were on the phone all the time. But when we saw each other, it was like we had a year not passed. And when I heard that awful news that he was no longer here, you know, it was horrible. And so after that, we started to have a block party in Brooklyn. First, we started having block parties with Michael Jackson, and then we started doing one for brother Prince. So I miss him, and I'm glad to be here in his hometown, and glad to be here with you all. Thank you very much.
All right, y'all. So if you want to learn more about Spike's project, thevisibleproject.io, coming out very soon. He talked a little bit about this. It's
this summer.
This summer? Okay. We're not getting a firm date, but this summer. Let's look forward to it. We want the VeeFriends community to check it out. And if you want to follow along, Spike, you recently got your Twitter back.
Right.
Spike Lee.
I had to get on Twitter for a while, but NFTs brought me back.
NFTs are bringing you back to Twitter. I know you've got millions of followers on a lot of social platforms, and at Spike Lee Joint is your Twitter handle, right?
And also, as I said, I just directed the 5th anniversary spot for Nike. We brought back Mars Blackman in it. And to see the long official director's version, go on my Instagram, official Spike Lee. That's not the 30-second spot. The long, not long, but the director's cut. Check it out, please.
Check out the director's cut. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Spike Lee.
All right, y'all make sure y'all stay tuned, like it or not. Going down next.
You sure you can handle? We be faster than Django.
Pixie on the moon. Good to see you. Good morning.
When you're so salty, I'll still take a bite. We can take my Lambo. I'll put on a tight show.
Katrina, good morning to you.
Thank
you for that.
Can't stop, won't stop. I can't stop, won't stop. I can't stop, won't stop. Can't stop. Can't stop, won't stop. Can't stop, won't stop. Can't stop, won't stop. Can't stop.
Woo! All right, y'all. I joined the gym and said to the trainer, I want to impress beautiful, beautiful girls. Which machine should I use?
We can take my Lambo.
He said try the ATM outside.
You sure you can handle? We be faster than Django.
Sophia Williams, good morning, Miss Sophia. Hey, Miss Sophia. Six Dragon Daddy, what's going on? Good morning. Finally. Laura Estrada, good morning to you. JD, good morning. Trevor Pickney, what's going on? Eric Wynn, good morning. It get her 9.
Can't stop. Can't stop. Can't stop. Can't stop. Can't stop.
Sorry, sir. We don't serve time travelers here. A time traveler walks into a bar. That was it. That was the joke. That was all y'all got. Lady Lou, good morning. Love you too, mama. Carly Wynn, good morning to you.
Just wanna be a mini-me. Feeling me,
Shay.
Just wanna be a mini-me. All these neck, just wanna be a mini-me. All these neck, just wanna be a mini-me.
Ism Onassis, good morning.
Just wanna be a mini-me. All these neck, just wanna be a mini-me. All these neck, just wanna be a mini-me.
Robert Wilson, Buster Be Good, good morning to y'all.
I'm about to go Goku. Leave my head is red like old news. Yeah, trying to get the green like it's Whole Foods. Couldn't take my style and now you so blue. Yeah, we don't even know you. Your hometown, we don't need go to. Trying to get it worldwide, global. Looking like a show, you been killing this is go to. Spiller, the whole man killer. Life so free, can't no man kill him. Came from the bottom, was a
Tyler, good morning, Tyler.
Man with no family, don't
JD, yes, UFOs are real.
Survive through the wreckage. Should go look for the exit. New sheriff in town, I get a little reckless. Mr. Memo.
All right, y'all. Y'all know what time it is. Let's go ahead and get this show started. Yeah. We had to wait on y'all know what time it is. Good morning, y'all. I had to go ahead and start and delete some stories in my damn team. Good morning, everybody.
It's time for Like It or Not, y'all. 9 a.m. to 10:30, yeah. Like It or Not is on your channel, yeah. Politics and culture, it's we change skin like we're supposed to, yeah. Interviews and all the news, we get to choose what gets the views. Like it or not, with Queen Azor, it started now, so stick around.
Like it or not, it's going down. Like it or not, y'all stick around. Oh, Rebecca Azor is coming through.
I just invented a telepathically controlled air freshener.
For you,
makes sense when you think about it.
This is his show. He's a politics pro. I am your DJ. DJ exclusive. Y'all know who I am.
I stay dropping them jams.
Like it or not, it's going down. Like it or not.
What do you call a zombie who writes music?
Around. Oh,
a decomposer.
Like it or not, it's starting now.
Just so everybody's clear.
Like it or not.
I want to put my glasses on.
Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon starts now.
In March of 2020, Amazon fired Christian Smalls from his job at a fulfillment center in Staten Island after he helped organize a protest outside of his workplace. Smalls said that he did this to bring attention to unsafe working conditions at the start of this pandemic. Brother Smalls, Christian, how you doing, man? Thanks so much for joining me again.
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I wanted to bring you on. We spoke at the start of this pandemic, and at the start of this pandemic, you made a lot of waves. And in fact, you became a primary target of Amazon because of your union efforts, your unionizing efforts, but also just, pointing and highlighting the fact that the conditions of workers in Amazon warehouse were atrocious and literally led to people catching COVID-19 and even some deaths. Can you talk about what you were working on then and what you're working on now with regard to this this union effort?
Absolutely, yeah. Last year, as you remember, the height of the pandemic, New York City being the epicenter, I tried to be proactive instead of retroactive and protect my workers, employees that work underneath me in my department, in that entire facility from catching COVID-19. The company refused to listen. And as a result, 11 months later, you may have heard Letitia James has filed a lawsuit on my behalf. Over 250 of those associates at that facility have contracted the virus. And many of them came back to that facility within 7 days. So it just validates the fact that I was telling the truth the entire time. And, that somebody needs to be held accountable. So I'm glad that we're seeing that there's an investigation and also a lawsuit that's following up on that. So, where we at now, we're still trying to unionize. Alabama is the main focal point right now. I just came back from Alabama last week, and I think the media and everybody should be talking about that.
Absolutely. And speaking of Alabama, Bessemer, Alabama, Amazon workers are voting on whether or not to unionize. And on Tuesday, actor Danny Glover joined those workers in solidarity, where he was invited by a local news station. And this is what Danny Glover had to say about what's going on in Alabama at Amazon.
Here to Birmingham. What brings you here?
Well, I'm here to support workers who are employed by Amazon, who have a very important vote at this particular moment, and that's to vote on whether they want to have a union. And I'm partial to that in the sense that I'm a big union supporter and certainly been a supporter and advocate for organized labor and unions since I was a child. My parents were union workers. My mother and father were at the United States Post Office all of their career, and each and every point of that, they were involved in the union as young adults until they retired.
Wow. So this is somewhat personal for you, I guess, with trying to convince people.
Well, I'm just trying to support them. I mean, it's certainly the fact that a union doesn't need me here to ordain or to champion its purpose. I've seen it work, as I said, in my own life, and seen it work as always around various other experiences that I had, whether it's been with hotel workers, or laundry workers, or clothing manufacturers, textile workers, or all those places where I've been able to support auto workers, support unions. And it's one of the very great privileges that I've had as someone who has gained this visibility by on stage and television and films, but at the same time have a chance to support ordinary people.
Christian, could you speak to the significance of what's happening in Alabama? Like you said, you were just there. Danny Glover was just there last night. It is a massive movement, and it's a movement against a tremendously, unimaginably powerful organization by the name of Amazon.
Absolutely. This is probably the most important union vote probably since the 1930s, since the Great Depression. There was an economic collapse then. Last year, we seen that with in 2020, and we're still living in this pandemic right now. And right now, we have an opportunity for the first time in American history to have an Amazon facility unionized. And I think it will galvanize the rest of the nation. I think this will be an uprising for all unions across the nation. So once again, I believe this is probably the most important union vote on the table since the 1930s. And I think it's really important. If it's successful, that we can also use this news to galvanize and organize facilities all across the nation, which I plan to do. So I'm hoping that I have good news once the union vote is closed.
I want to bring my co-host Rebecca Azor into the conversation because, as I look at what you're doing, man, and the fact that you personally have been a target of Amazon, right? The first thing they did was fire you. And then the next thing they did was a PR campaign against you. And you had to get help from the people. the people had to step in and speak to that real quick for me.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. You know, a week after I was fired, you know, Jeff Bezos and his top general counsel, you know, tried to run a smear campaign calling me not smart or articulate. And ironically, make me the whole face of the unionizing efforts. So, yeah, that's exactly what I did. I founded an organization. I traveled the country for the last 11 months with my organization, protesting at every single one of Jeff Bezos' mansions. And here we are. We're still fighting. And one thing I learned from Amazon, a principle was called see it, own it, and fix it. And I saw the issue last year, and I owned up to it. And I hopefully, when it's all said and done, I fix some type of issues that we had with that company systemically. So that's what I'm here for the long haul.
Well, that's definitely, Christian. Hi, how are you? That's definitely what I wanted to touch on as well, because it's interesting how they tried to put it on you when you decided to protest against the conditions that were there, saying that, hey, they're lying about the people that even have or that have tested positive for COVID. They have us in these conditions during the height of the pandemic. And all of the sudden, you know, they turned around and said they fired you because you were putting the workers' lives in danger, and that because of you, they were now testing positive, or they tried to put that rhetoric out there. How did you correct the story and make it yours and correct the narrative?
Yeah.
I continue to tell the truth. You know, the truth will set you free. And I told the truth from the beginning. And ultimately, as a result, now in this new lawsuit, you've seen, if you read the lawsuit now, 2 HR reps, the top HR of the building, and her BP, her business partner, wrote a letter in solidarity saying that I should have never been terminated. You know, they said that the termination was justified and that the quarantine policy was never clarified to me. And also, I never returned inside the facility when I protested. I was outside the entire time. So, again, I told the same story from the beginning. And now it's starting to come to the light. You know, the truth is coming out there. And I think the people that were behind the scenes that had to sit in on that termination, they're starting to feel that it was definitely wrong, and they're going to speak up about it. And I'm happy to see that it's coming out now.
Yeah, and it's also because of your voice, right? You decided to take a stance against what was going on in there during the pandemic, although they tried to put that smear campaign out and said that you weren't smart, you weren't articulate. Indeed, you were. You know, you weren't doing this for clout. You were doing this because this was affecting you and the people that you were working around. How would you say that your life has changed in this past year with you doing the protest and you traveling to make sure that other people in these Amazon locations are every
mansion, you went to every mansion, Jeff Bezos, man.
Everyone.
That's real G.
Bad boy.
On Google. You know, I mean, I'm pretty sure you got more of them, but we hit up a lot of them, and you know, my life changed forever. You know, definitely couldn't imagine this a year ago. I actually just looked at one of my memories on like Snapchat. I think I was in the club popping bottles last year. So, you know, I just tell people I wasn't an organizer beforehand. I was a concerned supervisor, obviously a father of kids. And that was my main concern, my children and my family. But I realized it's a bigger picture. And it's bigger than me. And, you know, if nobody else would have did it, I don't think we would have got to this point. You know, if I didn't step up, if I didn't continue to fight back, I don't know how long workers would have went unprotected, number one. Number two, once again, I don't think Jeff Bezos would have retired this year. So it's a lot of that, you know, that happened.
Yeah, I was say like he's the heat that's getting ready to come to Amazon. Jeff Bezos is like, I'm out of here. He's stepped down for Amazon, but we still know where his mansions are, and we know where his money is coming from, and we know where all those facilities are, especially in Atlanta. They're everywhere. And in the last time we spoke, let me get off that train of thought because it takes me somewhere dark. The last time we spoke, you said that you also had difficulty convincing some of the workers at the warehouse to participate in this. A year later, and all the stuff that I know that they went through, do you think their minds have changed? And have you heard from any of them? And have any of them come that were hesitant before? Are any of them standing in solidarity with you now?
Yes, we definitely gained a lot more support. Workers definitely seen the issues. They actually lived it. They're still going through it as we speak. There's still workers still contracting the virus, unfortunately. We had a worker who just died a few weeks ago from Virginia. Wow. He was a COVID tester. Pushan Brown, I had to raise money for that family. So we're still living with the same issues I was fighting on day one. But we definitely have a lot more support now, even international support, from Amazon working over the world. So, I'm hoping once again with the union vote in Alabama, I'll have some good news after March 29th when the vote is closed, to come back up here in New York and start, organizing that building again in the Staten Island. Part of the lawsuit is actual reinstatement. So is it possible they reinstate me? That probably
better position only. Better position only. We ain't taking nothing less, baby.
Yeah. Nah, they needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Nah. Listen. Before we get out of here, because we're coming up on the half hour mark, but I want the people to support you. And tell them. Is your GoFundMe still up? Matter of fact. Right. So tell them about where they can financially support you and where they can follow you, and anything else you need them to know about your work.
Absolutely. Yes. Follow me on Twitter at @shut_down Amazon. No surprise there. My organization at TCOEW on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at TCOEW. The GoFundMe is on my Instagram page. And the link is in the bio, Chris.Smalls_.
Yeah. Christian Smalls, brother, thank you so much. I just want to say this while you're on air, before we turn it over to the DJ to take us out of here. Rebecca, if you want to get a last word, obviously it's your show. I'm just filling in. But man, one thing that I came to terms with over this pandemic was that the revolution will not be led by podcasters. It won't be led by YouTubers. Ain't going to be led by people like me. It's going to be led by brothers and sisters and non-gender conforming individuals like you who are actually out there with your lives on the line right now in this moment, delivering packages to the rest of us privileged people who have the luxury of staying this pandemic at home. So I salute you, brother, in solidarity.
And also, Christian, like I said, they tried to count you out. It's just the theme for the week. Today, they tried to literally count you out, they tried to count you out back at that time, and you were just a supervisor that was concerned, but you pulled back up and you was like, well, who ain't smart? Who's not articulate? I'm fighting for people. I'm doing my thing. And you just been winning ever since. But the fact that you're doing it, by helping people, that is the biggest part to me. And when you are genuine like you, it's going to keep on coming. Like your heart is really, truly there. And I think that that's why it's important that people see this and they support you. It's just going to grow. And more power to you, brother. More power to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Solidarity.
I'm always pleased to be joined by brilliance, and brilliance that is also wrapped in love. I want to introduce to our show for the first time, Marianne Williamson, who is an American author, spiritual leader, political candidate, and activist. She has written 13 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers, and she most famously and recently ran for president in the Democratic primaries of 2020. Sister Williamson, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
Oh, I'm good, thank you. And thank you so much for having me on.
The pleasure is ours. I want to begin with just who you are. And I know most people watching this absolutely already know who you are, but just in context of the reason I reached out to you, I see you talking all the time about the hard issues. And then you also talk about the need and the necessity for love in the midst of these very difficult issues. If you're like me, that probably is difficult when you consider how fatuous and ridiculous American politics can actually be. So let me just start with the $1 million question. How do you balance maintaining love in a system that's so full of hate?
Well, if a system is full of hate, that means it needs love. I mean, if you're a doctor and somebody comes in with a wound, the doctor doesn't say, oh, that's so negative. It's so awful. You have a broken leg, but let's look at your elbow. If a system is filled with hate, it needs healing that much more. It needs the consciousness of that which is reparative that much more. So I look at something that is deeply corrupt, and I think we need to go there. I don't look at something that's corrupt and think, let's avoid it, because it won't get less corrupt. It is, inertia means the tendency of the object to move in whatever direction it's been moving until a direction of a counterforce. We can't look at the corruption and the toxicity and the genuine danger, potential danger of the current system, and as a generation turn away and then die happy. It can't happen.
Right. I can't possibly, I say it all the time, it's like, I can't die yet. I got to live, because if I can't die happy knowing I'm living a broken system for my children and their children and their children. And if we're lucky, that we would have that kind of future. But we're in a system now that most certainly is on a collision course with disaster, because it's rooted in things not just like hate, but rooted in greed. And part of your campaign really was speaking to that issue of greed and how it is breaking us and how it is breaking people. Talk about your campaign and how you came in certainly differently. You came in speaking differently. You were addressing issues. Matter of fact, you were one of the first people, if not the first person, to mention reparations on those debate stages. And you just came for it all. Tell us about that process, and equally as important, the kind of pushback that the system gave you.
Well, the pushback the system gave me is very much aligned with what you were talking about a few minutes ago before I came on. The system has a pre-prescribed conversation, and it also has a pre-prescribed group of candidates that it has allowed into what it believes should be deemed qualified. And that has to do with people whose careers have been entrenched for decades in the system that drove us into this ditch. The idea is that they're the only people qualified to lead us out of the ditch. So I did come in talking about things that everybody I know talks about. The fact that economic values have at this point replaced humanitarian values, that capitalism has become, over the last 40 years, so untethered to ethical consideration as to be a serious danger to life among people in our country, people in the world, and the planet itself. That this absolutely must change, or we are on our way to global calamity, the likes of which we are already flirting with. But the system, the political media industrial complex, and I think you were referring to that as well, they're not disconnected. They clearly are a boys' club that work together. They won't have it. And if you seek to challenge it, they have their ways of dealing with you.
No, yeah, they have a big, broad tool set that they can use, and the very first line in their defense to protect this system from the people is that media industrial complex. The last line is the military industrial complex. If they just have to wield it out on us, they will. Would you speak then, because there is an undertone. One of the reasons I think I connect with what you say so much is because the things that you say actually connect to how we survive as a species, how we survive in I want to say in perpetuity, because what we're doing right now is a recipe. I think people don't believe that this could be the last generation. I think people take for granted that our children's generation could be the last generation. But the way that we're behaving ourselves collectively, the way that we're engaging in this greedy system, the way we engage in these endless wars is a recipe. And the way we just completely disregard the environment is a recipe for our destruction. But I feel that one of your messages is how do we survive as a species? Could you speak on that?
Well, I totally agree with you. We are carrying on with a naive arrogance, forgetting the lessons of history. The lessons of history demonstrate that there have been great civilizations that have crashed and burned. And our civilization can crash and burn. We are collectively demonstrating behavioral patterns that are maladaptive for our survival. And in our case, not only the survival of our civilization, but as you say, of the species itself. And we all learned as children about how evolution works. The species will either evolve in such a case, will either mutate in such a case, or it goes extinct. Now, I do believe that that which represents an evolutionary alternative, that which represents the collective mutation, is present among us. And I believe the people of this country, and I believe the people of the world, there is a critical mass of people. You can feel it. It's an aspirational yearning that is demonstrating itself everywhere. New ways of agriculture, new ways to deal with food, new ways to deal with economics, new ways to deal with business, new ways to deal with medicine. It's there. The problem we have is that the economic and political systems that dominate our political and geopolitical realities are stuck in the regressive mode of behavior, and they form as they are at present an obstruction when the entire purpose of the political institutions is to be a conduit for solutions.
Yes.
And that's where we are right now. And that's why so many of us are screaming as loud as we can.
Absolutely.
So, Ms. Williamson, my question to you would be, I know that you spoke about, like, in these times, you know, to combat the negativity and the toxic is to show love and to, instead of run away from it, go towards it. It's pretty hard, especially as a person of color, a Black person right now in the country, to, you know, see it through that mindset, especially in these moments. So it's what else would be another option? Like, especially because mentally we're broken, and there's always something coming up. The system is against us. You know, we have this whole COVID-19 pandemic. It's against us, with us being the least to get the help and the assistance that we need. It's a lot. So, you know, it almost sounds like it sounds good. I remember when I used to walk in that, where it'd be like, you know, love on it. But some people are just so mentally worn out and torn, and just can't see it that way. So what would be another option? You know what I mean?
Well, first of all, we were talking a moment ago about the lessons of history. Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. have already created the template that you're asking for. We don't have to create any new wheels here. It's the idea that we ourselves have to practice the love that we want to see dominate the world. On the other hand, love involves truth-telling. I heard you a few minutes ago. There was no lack of love in what you were saying. You were simply stating the truth. It's stating the truth, standing for justice, refusing to tolerate it, but without personally demonizing anyone. We can critique the system without personal demonization. And I think a lot of people are doing that right now, and that includes you. So, and is it difficult? Of course it's difficult. It was difficult for the abolitionists. It was difficult for the women's suffragettes. It was difficult for the civil rights workers. But to you, Rebecca, I remind you also, we're American women. We're not porcelain dolls. These are troubled times. These are tough times. And I really believe that this is really a time to look deeply at our ancestors. Yes, there are ancestors who were murderers and slave owners and the worst of the worst. But we also have ancestors who were liberators. We also have ancestors who repudiated that, who pushed back, who carried humanity forward. And I think we're living at a time when, as important as it is to identify the problems in the past, we need to identify with the problem solvers. And yes, they were stressed, and yes, they were anxious, and yes, clearly they would have been traumatized, but they continued. They continued to walk, they continued to push. And I think that's what we're doing. And I think also we're doing it together. I think in a way, we need to maybe in a certain way give ourselves a little more credit than we're giving ourselves. A lot of people are rising up right now too, and trying to own our yes and own our no. Absolutely no, you cannot continue to do this to our children. You cannot continue to do this to our people. You cannot continue to do this to our planet. That doesn't mean I don't love you. But as Martin Luther King said, God said I have to love my enemies. He didn't say I have to like them.
Come on, somebody. Come on, somebody. I want to ask you about that a duality. Do you find ever that in your walk of love in these political spaces is matched by an equal amount of rage at the amount that our system just devastates human life? the complete and utter disregard for human life in the global South, the complete disregard for what's going on in Yemen, the casual disregard for the 22 lives that just were taken in the airstrikes in Syria. Like, I find that the more I love, the angrier I get at this system. What is that duality for you?
To me, it's like when you look at an Olympic level athlete, let's say an Olympic level, or let's say a tennis player at a place like Wimbledon, and that tennis player drops a ball, making a mistake they haven't made since they were 12 years old. They do not have the luxury of spending a fraction of a second going, oh, damn, they can't, they got to keep. We don't have the luxury. So yesterday, for instance, I watched a few minutes of President Trump's speech. I saw all of those people standing up, going crazy, excited at the idea of his running a third time. I definitely know that that would be a path to fascism in America. And I felt the emotions, everything you're saying. And discipline, just the word disciple and the word discipline come from the same place. Marianne, no time. Every moment you spend going into anger or fear is a moment you should spend articulating the alternative, organizing for the alternative, inspiring and motivating for the alternative. Don't let it drag you in. In the Course in Miracles, it says, look at the crucifixion, but don't dwell on it. Look at it, know it's there, be informed, and don't spend one more moment leaking your energy and giving it to that, because your energy is so needed right now to create the alternative that will carry the day and take humanity in a different direction.
One last question from me. And because I have probably 1,000 questions, we could probably talk about this stuff for days. You came out very boldly for reparations, which is something that, you know, has been a pawn in the hands of a lot of politicians, including the Democratic Party. But you were unequivocal about descendants of enslaved Africans in this country being owed reparations. Could you just speak about your conviction around that issue and in any pushback that may have caught you off guard around pushing that issue?
My political views, as all of my views, rest on a foundation of spiritual principle, because I believe that spirituality is not just a different category of life. It is the underpinning, that which connects us to our deep humanity. Yeah. And a universal spiritual theme in all the great religious and spiritual systems is atonement. You can't move forward in life if you don't clean up the past. Whether it's Catholics going to confession or Jews on the day of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year is the Day of Atonement. In Alcoholics Anonymous, you have to admit your character defects. You have to own it where you've been wrong, and you've got to make it right. Yeah. So the more I studied about American history, I was writing a book called Healing the Soul of America in the late 90s. And I took a deep dive into American history more than I had before. I was already a liberal on social justice issues, including race. I was raised in that kind of a home. But the more I studied about American history, the more I got, whoa. And I saw that there's no way that the United States can go forward and have the life we want until we not only atone, but make amends. Now, in terms of the atonement, I had written a book at the end of the 90s, Healing the Soul of America, including talk about how we needed reparations. And in my own work, I was already leading all over the country, not only racial healing circles, but these ritualized prayers where white people would apologize to Black people, and some very powerful things happened. But the more time went on, the more I realized, if you owe me $1,000, as much as I would appreciate the apology, I'd also like my money back.
Come on, somebody.
So I realized at a certain point, we can talk about white privilege all we want, but take a stand here. And for that matter, I'll tell you something else about reparations. We don't need another study.
Come on.
We know what happened. We don't need more evidence. We're going to have a bill to collect evidence. We know we have the evidence. It's right in front of us. It's time to put money on the table and to begin negotiations. So I was very clear about that. And this was one of the reasons why I ran. I definitely noticed that the conversation, as soon as I mentioned it on the stage, somebody came in and said, oh, we won't be talking about that. But To be honest, it was a woman of color who did that.
And
that's exactly. That doesn't shock me. Look, that doesn't shock me at all. I'll say, Ben hit it right on the head. I was going to ask you about reparations and what that process was like for you, but for you, I think it's considered radical when you talk reparations, okay? And especially not being a Black person and being for that. And it's almost where if you speak about it, you know that your possible campaign can be doomed. But you still stood on that because you believe that. And you know what's right. You said something very, very important. We do not need another study. Listen, put the money on the table and let's begin negotiations. We know what happened. This should not be anything that we keep having to find information. If it happened, is there something that's going to change and say that we don't need reparations? Nothing's going to change. That was the history. That's what you guys did. This is what you guys didn't give us when it was promised to us. These are those kind of things that happen. And, but yes, you stood on such a radical a stance. And of course, it's going to be people who are in politics who want for their positions to still be protected. So they know they can't even speak the radicalization of speaking about reparations. So they know they can't even speak about that at all. So you definitely took a chance on that. And I really, that's big.
Right.
I'd like to point out, though, something we all know. The whole idea of America is radical.
Yeah.
The very idea that there should be a society in which, to the best of our ability, we will create societal conditions where everyone, no matter who they are, has a chance to soar. The ideal is radical. It has never been fully manifest, obviously, in this country. But there have been generations and groups of people who have tried, who have expanded the franchise, and who have, in every generation, pushed back against forces that would repudiate it. It's simply our turn. If you're not depressed, you're not looking. And if you're not radical, you're not taking things forward.
Yeah. Sister Williamson, you said something in this interview, and we were getting ready to wrap it up, but you just contextualized something. You said this government is supposed to be a conduit for solutions, and instead it has become a roadblock to those solutions on behalf of a system that is detrimental to us and that we have to find new ways, new solutions. I would love for you to just speak about that again, but perhaps throw out some of the solutions that you're thinking that we can take, and then what the people in the audience can do to help enhance those solutions, because we got to do something.
Yes, indeed. Right now, our governmental policies do as much to thwart people's dreams as to support people's dreams. As a matter of fact, I think it could be argued that it does more to thwart people's dreams, the majority of people, than to support them. The underlying cancer, the cancer that underlies all the others, is the undue influence of money on our politics. That more than anything. That with this massive transfer of wealth into the hands of a tiny percentage of Americans began with the trickle-down economics in 1980. But then in addition to that, when the Supreme Court began to give unlimited power, ultimately with Citizens United, to corporate interests and great wealth to influence campaigns as they have, this created an unholy alliance between extreme wealth and corporate power and government. Our government has become basically a system of legalized bribery, in which it does more to advocate for the financial short-term profit interests of these huge corporate interests than us. One major political party has been bought hook, line, and sinker into that mentality. They actually, they're unabashed about it.
Right.
The other major political party is really upset about it. And it tries to do what it can to minimize the suffering. But because on the periphery, but because of its own hostage, the fact that it too is hostage to its corporate donors, it too refuses to challenge the underlying forces that make all that suffering inevitable. What can the average person do? Speak it. Say it. Keep it up. Keep pushing. Do not be quiet. Do not let your exhaustion diminish your fervor. Do not let your trauma or your stress or your anxiety diminish your passion. Don't let them do it to you. Everything that you and I were saying before. Whether this will mean that the real left stops being peripheralized within the Democratic Party, or whether it means the left actually becomes a force, which it should be given the numbers of people who agree with this outside those two parties, I don't know. I'm living with those questions inside my heart, just like everybody else is. But right now, the question is not, what are we going to do? The question is, will I do it, or will I be sucked in to a system that so wants to exhaust me that I lose my passion for the things for which I was born?
My God.
Well, Miss Marianne Williamson, thank you so much for even sharing what, your word, because I think I call that a word, right?
It's a word.
Good word.
That was a word.
Thank you so much for sharing your good word. We would love to have you back here. Before you leave, let the people know how they can reach you or follow you.
Well, thank you so much. Well, people can go to Marianne.com. People can also follow me, of course, on Twitter and on Instagram and Facebook and all those places. I also have a podcast, Marianne Williamson Podcast. And all the nice, kind things that you just said to me, I say right back at you. Let none of us forget, we're all out there. There are a lot of us out there.
Yes.
More of us.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much once again, Ms. Williamson. And everyone, make sure you follow her. Get on her podcast.
Get on that podcast. Yes.
Yes. Make sure you get on that podcast. I'm gonna check it out definitely.
Yeah, make sure that you have your face in the place tomorrow, y'all. Patreon.com/LikeItOrNot. Patreon.com/LikeItOrNot. It is going to go down. You don't want to miss it. Like I said, we appreciate you. We love you again. If you want to support the show and become a member, you can. Yes, you. That's watching right now. You, right there. Yeah. You go to Patreon.com/LikeItOrNot. Patreon.com/LikeItOrNot and support the show. Also get access to all our patron parties, exclusive content, all of that good stuff, man. You don't want to miss it. All right? You don't. Anyway, we out. We'll see y'all. Thank you again for tuning in and watching. Deuces.
I'ma go through just to grow through. But pay me what you owe me for a minute. What you been saying about me. True. Right. I need my money right now. Probably the juice they stole out my crown. Sorry to tell you, I know my value. I'm gonna recoup. Don't waste my loyalty.